o'clock, and I'm going to call the regular evening meeting of the Boise City Council to order on June 17th, 2022. First two orders of business will be invocation and a pledge of allegiance. If you'd all stand, we do an invocation with a moment of silence. You'll join me in the Pledge of Allegiance. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United
States of America
and
and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Thank you. Would the clerk please call the roll?
Regent.
Here.
Clegg.
Here.
Halliburton.
Here.
Sanchez. Willits.
Here.
Woodings.
Here.
All present.
Thank you. Next order of business.
Madam Mayor,
Yes.
there's a couple items to remove from to eliminate from the consent agenda for a later date, and then another one to pull from the consent agenda. The one to remove for a later date would be Resolution 31722. And then the one to pull for further discussion would be Resolution 31222.
Okay. And you're asking unanimous consent to defer the one to the later date
That's correct.
and pulling the other one for further
Yes.
discussion. All right. The other number was, excuse me, I'm sorry.
312-22.
That's right. Yep. All right. When we get to consent agenda, we've got those without objection. Thank you. Next item is request for approval of the city council minutes for June 7th.
Madam Mayor,
Yes.
I move approval of the minutes of the work session and regular meetings of June 7th, 2022.
Second.
Moved and seconded. I will be abstaining as I was not present on June 7th. Would the clerk please call the roll?
Regent.
Yes.
Halliburton.
Yes.
Sanchez.
Yes.
Willits.
Yes.
Woodings.
Yes.
All in favor, motion carries.
Thank you. Next order of business is 5, and that is special business. First is 2 appointments to the Boise Public Library Board of Trustees.
Madam Mayor,
Yes.
I ask unanimous consent for the appointment of Rebecca Lemons to the Boise Public Library Board of Trustees for a 5-year term ending June 2027.
Without objection. Rebecca, I don't know. I don't see you here in person. I don't know if you're online.
Madam Mayor, she is not online.
Okay. We always allow folks to say a word, but I will just say I'm really excited to see Rebecca on this library board. She's done a lot of good service for the city already and from the health sector, and think she'll be a really valuable member.
Madam Mayor,
Yes.
I ask unanimous consent for the approval of Natasha Rush to the Boise Public Library Board of Trustees for a term ending July 2024.
Without objection. And is Natasha here?
Madam Mayor, Natasha is online and I believe she can speak if she would like.
I am.
Welcome,
I'm here.
Natasha.
I'm here.
Hello.
Hello. I'm really looking forward to the opportunity. I have literally grown up in libraries from public, and now I'm a school librarian. So I am really looking forward to being able to work with you guys. I'm excited. Thank you for the opportunity.
Well, thank you. And thank you so much for stepping up for this service. So exciting to have a school librarian on the library board. Really looking forward to your contribution.
Thank
Mayor?
you.
Yes, Councilmember Halliburton.
I serve as the council liaison to the library, and so I was able to look at both of the applications, and it is really exciting to see someone with so much library experience from a school standpoint on our library board, and then also really excited to see Rebecca on there as well. So we've got 2 great people coming on to the library board.
Thank you both. All right, item 3 on special business is CUP 21-26, a reconsideration request Just information for members of the public on reconsideration. The request before us tonight is whether or not the council would choose to reconsider. It's not a time for public comment or public testimony. Only if an item does come up for reconsideration, if the council agrees to do that, then you reset the public hearing for that. With that, Josh.
Thank you, Madam Mayor, members of council. So as you will recall, on April 25th, 2022, the City Council overturned the Planning and Zoning Commission's denial of the conditional use permit and found that the decision was made in error and in disregard of the facts and evidence in the record. So on June 2nd, 2022, we did receive a request for reconsideration from Scott Rose. And additionally, on June 7th, we received a request for reconsideration from the Veterans Park Neighborhood Association. The requests do not require a public hearing, as you mentioned, and are before council tonight to decide if the request for reconsideration shall be granted. If they were granted, staff would ensure the public hearing date is set and that notice is adequately given. So upon request, the council may reconsider a decision for good cause. Good cause includes the party requesting reconsideration has relevant information. The relevant information was not brought up at the previous hearing, and the information was not previously available. So with that, the planning team is just looking for direction from staff tonight. Thank you.
Madam Mayor.
Thank you. Councilmember Halliburton.
I looked at the request and requests plural for reconsideration. I read them from top to bottom. I didn't see any new information, information that wasn't appropriately discussed during the hearing, or information that was not addressed by the reason statement. And so I would move that we deny the request for reconsideration.
Second.
There's a motion and a second. Is there further discussion on the motion? I guess I will just comment that it's unusual actually to have a motion on these. We typically, if we are not going to reconsider, just allow it not to. I think in this case, council members felt, this council member who made the motion probably felt it was important to make a clear statement rather than just let it die. I would say I also reviewed both of the reconsideration requests. While it's clear that some members of the public don't agree with the decision, don't agree with the conclusions that the city council came to during the long hours of hearing, as I reviewed my own notes and reviewed the record, all of the items that were brought up for reconsideration were considered during the hearing, and I felt were adequately considered during the hearing, and no new relevant information was available. With that, would the clerk please call the roll?
Agent,
No.
Clegg,
Yes.
Halliburton,
Yes.
Sanchez,
Yes.
Willetts,
No.
Woodings,
Yes.
4 in favor, 2 opposed, motion carries.
And with that, the request for reconsideration dies. Next up is the consent agenda. All items with an asterisk are considered to be routine by the council and will be enacted by one motion. There will be no separate discussion on these items except for item 31222, which was requested by council member or citizen to be removed from the general order of business and considered in its normal sequence. And with that, we also had one change of the consent agenda. Resolution 317 was removed.
Madam Mayor,
Yes.
I move approval of the consent agenda as presented with the changes.
Second.
Moved and seconded. Any discussion? Would the clerk please call the roll?
Agent,
Yes.
Clegg,
Yes.
Halliburton,
Yes.
Sanchez,
Yes.
Willetts,
Yes.
Woodings,
Yes.
all in favor, motion carries.
Thank you. And now with that, we will consider resolution 31222. Councilmember Halliburton.
Madam Mayor, I think you might have some slight amendments to the resolution, but I just kind of wanted to give some context to the discussion before we put those forward for the rest of the council members and then for anyone who might be here. Boise, as everybody knows, is the city of trees. Councilmember Clegg, at least since I've been here, and I'm sure for years previous, has worked tirelessly to make sure that Boise maintains that designation as the city of trees, and has worked hard with our City of Trees Challenge. We've planted nearly 14,000 trees. I think it's 13,580 something since the initiative was started. When a landscaper is selecting the trees that they're going to use for a development, they use our City of Boise Tree Guide, and the City of Tree Guide is updated from time to time. And recently, within the last couple of years, the Golden Eagle Audubon Society reached out to see if they could identify which trees in the tree guide were pollinator friendly. Pollinators are bees, are butterflies, are hummingbirds, and a variety of other animals that are really essential for farming, for our gardeners, and really just for our ecological system in general. And what they found was that about a third of the trees in the guide already fell into this pollinator friendly category. So when they updated the guide, what they did is they ended up putting a symbol labeling which trees were pollinator friendly. And the resolution that we're looking at here is really kind of an ongoing commitment to building out our city's tree canopy, but also making sure that we're supporting our pollinators in the process. So with this resolution, we're really announcing a goal of making 1/3 of all of the trees that we plant in Boise to fall into that pollinator friendly category. And these are trees of all sorts of different sizes, all sorts of different shapes, and really serving all sorts of different purposes. A pollinator friendly tree doesn't cost more than a non-pollinator friendly tree. And so it's really something that shouldn't have an impact on the city's budget or any of our developers' budget as well. So really just one of those things in my mind that seems like a small deal, but really adds up to this idea of when change happens, change can be good. We can continue to build a canopy and we can continue to support and even grow our pollinators here in Boise. So that's kind of the context of this. And I don't know if there's further discussion or if we want to go to some of the changes you were talking about.
Thank you, Councilmember Halliburton. I would like to make just a few comments. When Councilmember Halliburton mentioned to me that he'd like to bring forward a resolution to ensure that as we worked on the City of Tree Challenge, we were cognizant of and attempting to plant the right number of trees that were also pollinator friendly. I was really excited. In fact, recently learned as this was all happening that one of the trees I planted on the parking strip in front of our house, unbeknownst to me, is a pollinator friendly tree, a linden tree. Some of you may have one. And I should have known because about this time of year when the tree flowers, you can stand under it and hear it buzz. The bees really, really love it. And it's exciting to think that we can both build a tree canopy, which has so many co-benefits, and add yet another co-benefit by doing this. I would make a request of Councilmember Halliburton when he makes the motion that we just add a phrase, it's kind of a clerical phrase in the first whereas. For those of you who don't know the City of Trees Challenge, we are challenging ourselves to plant a tree for every household in the city. That's 100,000 trees. And also to plant a tree for every resident in the city, a seedling somewhere in a forest nearby that's been impacted by insects or fire or other degradation like that. And so if Councilmember Halliburton would be so inclined, I would like to add that Boise is planting one forest seedling for every resident in an Idaho forest.
Madam Mayor, I move approval of resolution 312-22 with the changes brought forward by Council President Clegg, specifically a seedling for every resident.
Second.
Thank you. Any other discussion?
Madam Mayor?
Yes.
Nothing more as far as discussion. I just thought I would make sure that I acknowledge a few people who had worked on this. And the first is you and all the work that you've done to make Boise a more tree-friendly place. And our continued work in building out the canopy. It's something that you've, like I said earlier, you've done ever since I've been here. You've done it before I was here, and I know that that work will continue on. And so I appreciate your willingness and your guidance in putting the resolution together. Second really is Mike Andrews and Lance Davidson from the city's forestry team. And then Martha Brabeck, our ecologist from Parks and Rec. Really three incredible people to work with that are so dedicated to our tree canopy in Boise. And I think we're really excited to see this element add to it as well. And then the last is really the volunteers at the Golden Eagle Audubon Society who helped the city identify these pollinator trees and really advocated in pushing this forward and creating more pollinator friendly landscapes. The city partners with Golden Eagle on a variety of different projects, and they've always been a great partner. And it's always exciting when nonprofits bring stuff like this forward. So the work is definitely appreciated.
Thank you. Any other comments?
Madam Mayor.
Yes.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. I just want to thank both you and Councilmember Halliburton. I know this is a project that's near and dear to your heart. And I really appreciate you welcoming collaboration from one of our colleagues. And it's something I hope to see moving forward, more opportunities for us to support each other in the projects that are very special to us. I think we all have our projects that you know, when our time at council comes to an end, that we'll be able to look back on fondly and know that we made our mark. And certainly none of us can look at a tree and not think of Elaine Clegg. So thank you both.
Thank you. Well, with that, would the clerk please call the roll?
Agent,
Yes.
Clegg,
Yes.
Halliburton.
Yes.
Sanchez,
Yes.
Willetts,
Yes.
Woodings.
Yes.
All in favor, motion carries.
Thank you all. Item 7 on our agenda is ordinances. There are no ordinances scheduled for the first reading calendar, which brings us to the second reading calendar.
Madam Mayor,
Yes.
I ask unanimous consent that all ordinances on the second reading calendar be read by number and title only and filed for the third reading calendar.
Without objection.
ORD 29-22 and ordinance CAR 21-00036 for property located at 2587 South Maple Grove Road, amending zoning classifications of the city of Boise City to change the classification of real property, particularly described in section 1 of this ordinance and adjacent rights of way from R-1A to R-1C, setting forth a reasoned statement in support of such zone change and providing an effective date. ORD 30-22 and ordinance CAR 21-00047 for property located at 2315 South Broadway Avenue, amending zoning classifications of the city of Boise City to change the classification of real property, particularly described in section 1 of this ordinance and adjacent rights of way from R-1C single family residential 8 units per acre to R-2D medium density residential with design review 14.5 units per acre, setting forth a reasoned statement in support of such zone change and providing an effective date.
Thank you. That brings us to the third reading calendar.
Madam Mayor,
Yes, Councilmember Sanchez.
I move that further reading of ordinance 28-22 be dispensed with and the record reflect it has been read the third time in full.
Without objection.
Madam
I think
Mayor,
we need
point
a
of order.
second.
We need a second on that motion as a third reading.
Second.
We have a motion and a second. Sorry. Would the clerk please call the roll?
Agent,
Yes.
Clegg,
Yes.
Halliburton,
Yes.
Sanchez,
Yes.
Willetts,
Yes.
Woodings.
Yes.
All in favor, motion carries. ORD 28-22 and ordinance CAR 21-00038 for property located at 8373 West Victory Road, amending zoning classifications of the city of Boise City to change the classification of real property, particularly described in section 1 of this ordinance and adjacent rights of way from A-1 to R-3D DA, setting forth a reasoned statement in support of such zone change and providing an effective date.
Madam Mayor,
Yes.
I move that ORD 28-22 be approved.
Second.
Moved and seconded. Would the clerk please call the roll?
Agent,
Yes.
Clegg,
Yes.
Halliburton,
Yes.
Sanchez,
Yes.
Willetts,
Yes.
Woodings.
Yes.
All in favor, motion carries.
Thank you. Item 8 is unfinished business. We have no unfinished business scheduled tonight. And item 9 is new business, starting with subdivisions. First up is Mclean Terraces Subdivision, SUB 22-7 Boise City Preliminary Plat. Welcome, Jesse.
Madam Mayor, members of the council, the item before you is SUB 22-7, a request to approve a preliminary plat for 6 buildable lots on 0.42 acres in an LOD zone located at 701 and 711 West Franklin Street. On April 4th, 2022, the Planning and Zoning Commission approved a modification to the original PUD and recommended approval of the preliminary plat with some neighborhood opposition to the height of the proposed buildings, traffic concerns, and then design. The original CUP or PUD, was for 5 buildable lots, but the applicant purchased the home at 711 Franklin and had to come back with a modification for the additional lot. The commission found the subject properties complied with the PUD and subdivision requirements. The applicant plans to reuse much of the existing structure on the corner of Franklin and 7th and construct 2 townhomes on either side of the original building while maintaining the existing home at 711 Franklin. The applicant is providing parking on site, pedestrian connections to existing detached sidewalks, and a sufficient tree mitigation plan. In conclusion, the planning team and Planning and Zoning Commission recommend approval of SUB 22-7, and I will stand for questions.
Are there any questions for staff? I do have one quick question I'll ask it of the applicant as well. There were trees that were going to be removed and mitigated in the original application. Are there more trees that are going to be removed as a result of this addition to it?
Madam Mayor, council members, I don't know the exact number of the original application. However, there are 3 trees in the right of way that are diseased or damaged that are going to be removed and mitigated for in the right of way, and 3 trees on site that are going to be removed and mitigated for on site.
Thank you. Any other questions? With that, Ben, welcome in person. Applicant Ben Semple.
Madam Mayor, members of City Council, Ben Semple, 1450 West Bannock Street, Boise, Idaho, 83702. I want to thank Jessie for her presentation, encapsulated why we're back here. You're probably familiar with the previous project that was approved there. To get right to your question, we are mitigating for there are 3 additional trees that were along that shared lot line of the new lot that was purchased and the previous parcel on the corner. So we are mitigating for those fully. Actually, I think we have more trees going in than were removed in terms of the caliper inches. The trees that were diseased within the right of way have already been removed, but we are committed to planting some class 3 as well as some class 2 trees there because the planter strip is 10 feet wide. So it accommodates the class 3 trees. And then knowing that there's been some modifications to looking at trying to encourage pollinators, we're definitely looking at the varieties of trees. That's actually the first I've heard of it. So I will be looking into that, so how we can incorporate at least a third of those to be pollinator friendly. Yeah, the project really is pretty similar. There was a single family home that was going to be constructed on the site as part of the original project. That has since gone away and has become 2 townhomes. But we feel the project was improved. We can actually self-park every house. We're adding an attached garage to the existing structure on the corner. So each home will have a 2-car garage on their lot instead of previously where there was some flags and kind of some unique orientation of flag lots to get back to garages. So we also removed an ADU that was part of the original proposal from this project. So ultimately we have the same number of living units as we did with the previous project. And with that, I would stand for additional questions if you have any.
Ben, as I looked at it, you are still retaining the historic structure on the corner and removing the 2 that you determined just weren't feasible structurally to keep. Is that correct?
Madam Mayor, members of City Council, that's correct.
Thank you. Any other questions for the applicant? Thank you.
Thank you.
This is not a public hearing. We do allow folks to comment on these subdivisions briefly if you have comment. Is there anyone who'd like to comment? I don't have anyone who indicated beforehand that they would.
Madam Mayor,
Oh, Nina, potentially. Okay.
we do have Eric Hagan with Nina.
Eric, are you here?
Yes, I am, Madam Mayor, council members.
Thank you. Welcome.
Thank you. We've been following this project through since the beginning and have had several neighborhood meetings, as well as discussed the project with the NINA board. And NINA is in support of this project. We think it'll be a great addition to the neighborhood.
Thank you. Are there any questions for Eric? Okay. Seeing none, I think the project is rightly before the council.
Madam Mayor,
Yes,
I move approval of Mclean Terraces subdivision, SUB 22-7, Boise City preliminary plat, SUB 22-7, Mclean Terraces subdivision, brought forward by Rodney Evans plus partners at 701 and 711 West Franklin Street, preliminary plat for 6 buildable lots on 0.42 acres in an LOD limited office with design review zone.
Second.
moved and seconded. Any comments? Would the clerk please call the roll?
Agent,
Yes.
Clegg,
Yes,
Halliburton.
Yes.
Sanchez,
Yes.
Willetts,
Yes.
Woodings.
Yes.
All in favor, motion carries.
thank you. Item 2 on subdivisions is Gerard addition subdivisions, SUB 22-3 Boise City preliminary plat. And our presenter this time is Sabrina. And I didn't say much, but welcome to both of our new staff people. It's great to see you here. Thanks.
Thank you, and good evening, Madam Mayor, members of the council. The item before you is a preliminary plat for the Gerard Addition subdivision. The subdivision is comprised of 2 residential lots on 0.26 acres located at 3324 West Tucker Road in an R1C zone. The subject site is located in a residential neighborhood comprised of various single-family, duplex, and multifamily homes, and the Hillside to Hollow Reserve is located approximately 0.2 miles to the northeast. There are 2 existing dwellings on the site, both of which the applicant proposes to retain. The existing parcel is double fronted and will be split so that each home is on a separate lot with one fronting on Tucker Road and the other fronting on Gerard Street. Each home will take vehicular access from its adjacent street via the existing individual driveways on the site. There are existing street improvements along Tucker Road, and the applicant will install curb gutter and 5-foot wide attached sidewalk along the site's frontage on Gerard Street. Attached sidewalks are appropriate in this instance due to the location of the existing home, which would prevent the installation of detached sidewalks with a landscape buffer. No changes are proposed to the existing landscaping on the site, and all trees will be retained. One neighbor did express opposition to the proposed subdivision. However, the Planning and Zoning Commission did find that the application complied with all approval criteria. And at their April 4th hearing, the commission approved the associated planned unit development and recommended approval of SUB 22-3. I'll stand for any questions. Madam Mayor, no, currently there are no street improvements along Gerard on the north side.
So this lot will be adding a sidewalk, the first of which we hope will then be improved to the east.
Yes, that is correct.
And they're adding it as an attached sidewalk.
Yes.
So here's my question. It kind of sets the scale and the design of the sidewalks going east. We know even on residential streets that attached sidewalks aren't always the best. Did we ask? I know that the house is very near the road, the existing ADU. Did we consider at least trying to create some safe space along the edge for pedestrians?
Madam Mayor, considering the narrow right-of-way and the distance between the existing structure and the property line, it was staff's opinion and the opinion of ACHD that the attached sidewalk would be the most appropriate. If there are additional conditions that the council would like to place, you may do so.
Thank you. I appreciate that. I just always bring it up because I don't like to make these waivers unless there's a real reason to. I think in this case, it seems to make sense because of the location and the narrow width of the right of way, but just want to make sure we don't take it lightly. Thank you. Any other questions for staff? With that, the applicant, Stefan St. Marie, are you here?
Madam Mayor, they are online.
Okay, you're online? There you are. Thank you. Welcome.
Hello. Yeah, hi. Thank you, Madam Mayor and City Council members. Yeah, I don't have much to add from what the city planner Sabrina provided. I guess I would comment that the sidewalk is a little awkward in this space since it starts and stops on either side and kind of enters into the backyard of the grassy apartments on Gerard Street there. But I'm fine either way. Obviously, sidewalks add a lot of like neighborhood value. But yeah, that's my only comment. Thank you.
Thank you. Any questions for the applicant? Hearing none, we expected the Sunset Neighborhood Association President, Tom Helmer. Tom, are you here?
Madam Mayor, he's not online.
He's not, okay. Well, any more questions for staff? If not, this application is rightly before the City Council.
Madam Mayor, I guess I do have a quick question for staff, just because I got thrown off by maybe just some miswording. On the north side, which would be Gerard Street, there is a sidewalk proposed, but it's not a detached sidewalk.
Right.
That's correct.
Yeah.
Great. Yeah, because for some reason, when hearing from the applicant, it almost sounded like there wasn't going to be a sidewalk. And it's like, I can understand why it might not be detached. It's a really slow, narrow street, goes at a 90-degree corner. Not really a through street, but it does make sense that a sidewalk, even if it's not detached, would go in. Great.
Thank you for clarifying that.
Madam Mayor,
Yes,
I move approval of Gerard Addition Subdivision, SUB 22-3, Boise City Preliminary Plat. SUB 22-3 Gerard Addition Subdivision brought forward by Stefan St. Marie at 3324 West Tucker Road. Preliminary plat for a residential subdivision comprised of 2 buildable lots on 0.26 acres in an R1C single-family residential zone.
Second.
moved and seconded. Any further discussion? With that, would the clerk please call the roll?
Agent,
Yes.
Hallie Burton,
Yes.
Clegg,
Yes,
Sanchez,
Yes,
Willetts,
Yes.
Woodings,
Yes.
all in favor, motion carries.
thank you. With that, we will go to item B, which is public hearings. First up on public hearings is CAR 22-5, Platform Architecture Design at 9620 West Corey Lane, a rezone of approximately 0.7 acres from R1B to R1C. Sabrina, you're back up.
Right. Madam Mayor, members of the council, the next item before you is a rezone of approximately 0.7 acres located at 9620 West Corey Lane from R1B to R1C. The property is located at the northwestern corner of the intersection of West Corey Lane and North Linda Vista Lane, and the comprehensive plan land use map designates the site as suburban. R1C zoning is allowed within the suburban land use designation, and the surrounding neighborhood is comprised of a patchwork of R1B and R1C zoning, with R2 zoning also located to the south. The planning team finds that the R1C zone is the most appropriate for the site, as it will allow infill development, which reduces vehicle miles traveled and avoids costly infrastructure extensions to occur, while maintaining compatibility with the surrounding neighborhood. The rezone to R1C is also supported by the USTIC neighborhood plan, which calls for infill development with a density of 5 to 7 units per acre. The applicant proposes to develop the site with 5 new residential dwelling units, and the rezone is needed in order to accommodate that desired density. With no opposition, the Planning and Zoning Commission approved the associated planned unit development and recommended approval of CAR 22-5. And I will stand for any questions.
Madam Mayor, if you're speaking, we can't hear you.
I thought I had my microphone on and I did not. Welcome, Kathy.
Madam Mayor, members of council, Kathy Sewell with Platform Architecture Design. Don't really have anything to add. We appreciate staff's working with us throughout the process to put forth the application and the PUD. But with that, if you have any questions for us, we can certainly answer them. My client, the owner, is here as well. Okay. Sorry about that. Kathy Sewell, Platform Architecture Design. As I mentioned, which you didn't hear, we don't have any additional comments. If you do have any questions for me, I can certainly answer those. My client is here, the property owner. He can address any questions you might have as well.
Oh,
Madam
Kathy,
Mayor.
I have one quick question. As you've can see from tonight, I care a fair amount about trees. You're showing a number on your preliminary plat. Are you removing trees that have been deemed to be healthy in order to do this subdivision?
Madam Mayor, yes, we did. The site has been cleared and we are proposing 18 trees. As part of one of the conditions of approval with the PUD, we need to work through tree mitigation with staff. But at this point, we believe that we're exceeding the number that we have removed. And we'll certainly work with staff on the selection of those.
And it looks, again, from the plat drawings that you've got class 2 and class 3 trees included in those. Is that correct?
At this point, that is correct. Yes, Madam Mayor.
Thank you.
Madam Mayor.
Yes.
I have a question about the site layout. It appears that the homes that are facing Linda Vista, one of them has a porch and entry that faces Linda Vista. And then there's an alley, then there's a 2-car garage, and then there's a home with an entry and porch that face to the side. I was just curious because what we know about more pedestrian oriented homes is that it's good to have a street or a front door that's visible from the street. So I was just curious about the decision making there and also the decision making of having the unit 2 back in the corner of the lot instead of kind of reconfiguring so that you could have everything up on the street front and then have garages interior.
Madam Mayor, Council Member Hollings. One comment from staff during the PUD was in question of that one unit on the north that has an entry that does not face the street. That is something that, as a condition of approval, we need to work through. As we in our planning for this, not only looking at the architecture, but also just sort of the approach, we felt that, with the idea of a sidewalk and the landscaping and overall articulation area, that will still read as a front entry. We understand staff's comment. And so that one unit on the north will get reconfigured so that all the doors, entries face the street. And in terms of the overall layout, we were working with ACHD and their requirements in terms of where site access could be taken and meeting their intersection dimensional requirements, setback distance. And so in terms of trying to locate that driveway off of Linda Vista, but also the overall intent of trying to create a PUD of single family type residential units versus more of a duplex or triplex type situation. It really became where we needed to locate that one unit sort of in that back corner. So that is sort of how that whole layout came about. We think it works well in terms of maintaining that single family character, privacy back there. But really, I think a lot of the design was driven by where we were allowed to put in a driveway based on ACHD's requirements.
Thank you for that answer. I understand how how difficult it can be to do some of these infill developments and work within the constraints of the land that you have and the rights of way required. So I appreciate it.
Further questions of the applicant? Thank you. I do have a quick question for staff after that. So first of all, it looks like there's a curb bulb out at the corner of Corey and Linda Vista. And then, so if you'd comment, was that a requirement of ACHD given the streets, the functional class of these streets, and also then comment on should we add a condition for the street facing entries in order to ensure that as you work through to final plat, you can get that?
Yes, Madam Mayor, Council President Clegg, the site improvements and the access were designed in compliance with ACHD's standards, including the sidewalk along Corey Lane that was planned to meet up with ACHD's further improvement of that entire street. And the condition for all units adjacent to a street to have a front door that faces that street was included with the associated PUD that was approved by the commission.
Excuse me, that's what I thought. We don't have that before us, right? We just have the rezone.
Yes, that's correct. Just the rezone.
Thank you. All right. With that, I will open the public hearing. First up, we typically allow the neighborhood association. If Jim Sakowski is here.
Madam Mayor, that individual is not online to testify.
What's that?
That individual is not online to testify.
Okay, is there anyone else from the neighborhood association here? All right, seeing none, I don't have anyone signed up. Is there anyone in the audience or online who would wish to testify? Hearing none, applicant could rebut, but there's not much to rebut. So if that's okay, we will close the public hearing, and this item is before the city council.
Madam Mayor,
Yes.
I move approval of CAR 22-5 platform architecture design at 9620 West Corey Lane, a rezone of approximately 0.7 acres located at 9620 West Corey Lane from R1B, single family residential, 4.8 units per acre, to R1C, single family residential, 8 units per acre.
Second.
Moved and seconded. Any discussion? I would just note that as desperately as we need housing in this city, I think that this will be a good addition. Look forward to working through the issues on the design and seeing it get built. Would the clerk please call the roll?
Agent,
Yes.
Clegg,
Yes.
Halliburton,
Yes.
Sanchez,
Yes.
Willetts,
Yes.
Woodings.
Yes.
All in favor, motion carries.
Thank you. Item number 2 is our second public hearing, CUP 22-7, Stephen Shaps at 1604 South Philippi Street, an appeal of the Planning and Zoning Commission approval of a conditional use permit to operate a group home on 0.3 acres in an LOD zone. And to present for staff, we have Delaney. Thank you. Delaney, sorry.
Thank you. Good evening, Madam Mayor, members of the council. Before you is an appeal of a conditional use permit. The project site is 0.3 acres in an LOD limited office with design review zone located at 1604 South Philippi Street. The site is currently developed with a vacant 2,354 square foot commercial office, which was originally constructed as a single family home in 1954 and then converted into an office in the 1990s. The property is situated at the southeast intersection of West Overland Road and South Philippi Street, with the Valley Regional Transit bus route running adjacent to the site on the north and a bus stop located directly west. There are mixed uses in the general neighborhood, including residential, commercial, and recreation. Less than a quarter mile to the east is a community activity center at Overland and Orchard, and the Hillcrest Shopping Center located directly north. On May 2nd, 2022, the Planning and Zoning Commission unanimously approved the applicant's request for conditional use permit to operate a group home. The proposed project includes renovating the interior of an existing building to have 8 bedrooms, 2 bathrooms, laundry room, shared living, and kitchen facilities. The element of this proposed project that triggers the need for a conditional use permit is the conversion from office to a residential use. The proposed use is compatible with the surrounding neighborhood and is large enough to accommodate the proposed use with all dimensional and developmental standards of the LO zone being met. The proposed project complies with the comprehensive plan because it's located at an intersection of a major transit corridor, adjacent to public transit, near a community activity center, and within walking and biking distance to employment, education, amenities, and other services. On May 3rd, 2022, Stephen Shapps appealed the Planning and Zoning Commission's approval with the following 2 grounds of appeal. One being that the site is unsafe for human habitation due to Idaho Power infrastructure being located adjacent to the property. The appellant cites a former lawsuit with the previous tenant with the power company regarding the health impacts due to proximity to the power lines. Staff has found no evidence that would suggest the property could not be inhabited as a residential use, and the zoning does allow for residential. Secondly, the appellant contends that the Planning and Zoning Commission did not honor a request for deferment to a later date. The appellant claims that the commission did not grant the request and therefore did not consider all facts in this investigation by Idaho Power. The Planning and Zoning Commission did not honor this request to defer from the appellant because it did not meet the qualifications to defer, which is set by Boise City Code. Additionally, Idaho Power does not comment on conditional use permits unless it's somehow impacting a facility or property that they own. Additionally, I'd like to note public comments were received during the appeal review. A letter from the Hillcrest Neighborhood Association was received requesting that the city impose additional monitoring to help protect the neighborhood. Other public comments discuss concerns with compatibility, transient use, devaluing of neighboring properties, and number of group homes owned by the operator. A letter of support was also received from a neighboring property, which is the Spanish preschool to the west. The planning team recommends that council deny the appeal and uphold the Planning and Zoning Commission decision, and I'm available if you have any questions.
Are there any questions for staff? So I do have a quick question, and while it may not be just this application, you note that the bus stop is very near here. There's not a good crossing of Overland to get back and forth from the bus stop. Was that, I didn't see discussion about that.
Madam Mayor, council members, the bus stop is to the west on Philippi. I don't know that there's a great crossing there either. So if that is something that, you know, we feel we need to improve pedestrian connectivity there, I think that's something this council can provide condition on.
And we don't have any staff from HHD here tonight or online, is that correct?
I believe that's correct.
Okay, thank you. Any other questions for staff? All right, with that, this is an appeal. And so we have the appellant, Steve Shapps, who is a party of record. In order to testify at an appeal hearing, you had to have testified or given written testimony at the original hearing. And so from our records, the only other person who's signed up tonight who is eligible to testify is Ruth Maddox, because you testified at the other hearing. So with that understanding, we'll start with the appellant. We'll go to the applicant, and then we'll hear from Ms. Maddox.
Just a moment, please. Oh, thank you.
Welcome.
Thank you. I'm Steve Shapps, 275 North Seven Oaks Avenue, Eagle, Idaho. And I've got some visual aids here for you. I don't know if you can see them. I guess you can on your screen here. These group homes are all for ex-convicts on parole. Just to clarify that, they're all owned by Joe Howell of Joe's House LLC. And in the last 6 years, he's put in 37 bedrooms for ex-convicts on the Boise bench, plus 8 more bedrooms in Meridian for a total of 45 bedrooms. You can see on the stars here where they are. They're all kind of in the same general vicinity, maybe a little bit outlier there. And he already owns one that's less than 200 meters up the street, which, is pretty close. And that one is a 5-bedroom with an apartment. So there's 6 there. There's 5 over here on Curtis Road. There's a combined 9 here. There's 10 over here and 7 here. And these are not halfway houses. They're oftentimes called halfway houses, but they're not halfway houses. There's no supervision. There's no state or federal funding. There's no city oversight. There's no permitting required except for this particular case. There's no licensing. There's no staff or supervision. Maybe Joe Howell comes by once a week, maybe not. So next slide, please. To give you a little timeline and historical data about this house. It was built in 1954 and used as a single family residence, and it was zoned residential at that time. In 1994, the former Boise Mayor Jay Amex, who's now deceased, filed a lawsuit against Idaho Power for the severe health problems associated with their power infrastructure. Not because of the power infrastructure, but because of the health problems created by multiple family members living in that house. And I spoke with the mayor's son, Don Amex, this morning to confirm that. He also had a statement read into the record at the Planning and Zoning Commission meeting that it wasn't the power lines themselves, it was the health effect created by the power lines. And I'll show you why in a few minutes. But I was able to confirm that with Don Amex this morning. And then on December 30th of 1994, Idaho Power settled the lawsuit by buying the house from the Amex family. And they signed a settlement agreement, which is referenced by Yakora Daniels. And I'd like to play her voicemail message for you.
Sir, before you play that, I need to ask, is this information that was available at the Planning and Zoning Commission meeting? If it isn't, as an
No.
appeal hearing, we're only
Okay,
supposed
okay.
to
It was not, so I'm not going to
consider the information in the record
Okay,
already. Thank you.
okay. But anyway, Idaho Power did sign a settlement agreement here. And then in July of 1996, Robert Glenn hired a law firm to send out letters initiating the rezoning of the property to commercial. And he actually came in and met with Boise Planning and Zoning, which I think was just called Boise Planning at that time. And that's before he bought the house. So Idaho Power may not have been a party to this, but they were knowledgeable about it, and they were encouraging it, because nobody goes out and starts initiating planning and zoning before they buy the house. And they bought the house a month later in August of 1996. Robert Glenn did. And then in mid-1996, Boise's Planning and Zoning supported conversion of that property to non-residential, and it was rezoned as commercial property. And Boise Planning and Zoning supported the rezoning because the power lines had significant impact upon the property, and in their own words, made it quite undesirable for residential use. And then for the last 26 years, it's been used as commercial property. But now all of a sudden, Joe Howell has bought the property and he would like to make it into back into a residential property for eight people to live in.
Mr. I'm going to mess up your name again.
Shops.
Sorry, I'm going to stop you for just a moment and ask a question of staff if I could.
Okay,
I want
sure.
to make sure that we're not considering new information, that this was in the record.
Madam Mayor, council members, I believe all this information in this timeline and outlined here was part of their initial public comment for PNC, so
Okay.
nothing new.
Thank you. I just wanted to clarify that.
No
I
problem.
appreciate it.
Next slide, please. So my appeal ground is that this is an unsafe structure for residential use. It was previously subject to a lawsuit, settled at a court. Idaho Power, according to Don Amix, came out and did some measurements on the electrical field at the house and determined that it was unsafe for residential use. They bought it. It was rezoned with their support to commercial property. And you can see the power lines in this photo. There is about 10 high amperage, high voltage lines running down Overland Road here, and they cross over the property. And the easement for those lines actually cuts through the center of the house. And it cuts from the roof all the way into the ground below the house. And it cuts through the house at an angle. The house is tilted a little bit. The easement is 40 feet into here, so it cuts through the house at an angle. And the house is flat and the power lines are dipping down very steeply down the Boise bench there. So they're actually closer to the house on the far side than they are on the near side. And then you've got 4 power lines crossing Overland Road coming this direction. So if you look up the power pole, you see a whole bunch of lines and they're crossing right at the house. And so your own Planning and Zoning Commission back in 1996 called this severely diminished, no longer practical, and quite undesirable for residential use. Next slide, please. So how do power lines and electromagnetic fields, why are they such a concern? Now, this is kind of a simple example showing a simple power line, and there's the house for scale, roughly for scale. And the strength of the magnetic field is not linear, it's very non-linear. So the closer you are to it, the stronger it is, and the more dangerous it is. And power lines are considered sources for extremely low frequency electromagnetic fields. So this is different from, you know, your microwave oven or your CT scan. So this is very low frequency stuff. And power lines lose energy in 2 different ways. They lose it by ground loss, which is also called ground capacitance. Got that right. And they lose it to the air, which is called corona loss. And sometimes you can actually hear the power lines crackling when the conditions are right, the atmosphere and the pressure is right. You can hear them crackling, and that's corona loss. And one thing Don Emick suggested this morning was that a new updated study be conducted so that we could get some hard science data of the electromagnetic field here and know whether or not it's currently a health hazard or not. If it's fit for residential use, it'd be nice to have some hard science data. And in a way, it's your job to keep people safe. Okay, next slide, please. Excuse me. So if you Google health hazards and electromagnetic fields, you'll find a whole host of data. And I've gone through the data, and the most commonly cited health effects are mental health disorders or exacerbation of existing mental health problems. That includes depression, anxiety, obsession, suicide, and sleep disorders. But there's also been links to cancer and Alzheimer's in adults and leukemia, which oddly is mainly in children. And those problems are probably going to be more acute in this specific case because the EMF source, that being the power lines, is so obvious. You know, there's no way to hide it. And the property has a previous history of health-related problems. So will ex-convicts living in the group home become depressed, anxious, obsessed, suicidal, homicidal, or subject to new or worsening health problems? And what happens to them if they do suffer those problems? You know, particularly if they become unable to pay rent to Joe's house. It's my understanding that Joe Howell doesn't let people live there for free, and he doesn't provide any health care to any of the residents. And he does not allow people to live there if they can't make the necessary payments to Joe's House LLC. So what would be the resulting impact on the community and the individuals if this happens? Okay, last slide. So during the Planning and Zoning Commission hearing, the Commissioner Blanchard stated, if power lines were killing people or making them sick, we would see it everywhere, including the school next door. He's referring to the Puente's Spanish language preschool next door. And you can see from this photo, here's the proposed group home here. Here's the Spanish language preschool, and the power lines are much less severe of a problem there, and the school is offset from the lines. It's not underneath them. Plus, it's not used as a residence. So the exposure time is fairly minimal. Whereas the power lines across the street, you can see them at a little different angle here. There's quite a bunch of them, and they're overhanging the property, and they're close to the house. That's all I have.
Thank you. Are there any questions for our appellant? Councilmember Bajent.
Madam Mayor, just a couple of questions. I think hopefully they're yes or no questions.
Okay.
This lawsuit between Mayor Amex that settled, it settled because it never reached a final judgment or a verdict.
That's correct.
And you've never seen a copy of the complaint in that lawsuit?
No, and Idaho Power is not going to provide any public documentation of their problems.
You've never seen the settlement agreement either, right?
They would not provide that to me.
And then the last is this electrical measurements taken in the 1990s. You've never seen those either, is that right?
They're not going to provide any study implementing health hazards associated with their power lines.
Okay, so that material is not in the stuff we have.
No, only Idaho Power has that, and they are not going to share it with you.
Great, thank you.
But Don Amex, the son of the mayor, did live in the house at the time.
I have one more question real quickly. You mentioned that there's already a group home up the street. And one of the complaints in the appeal is that this is an inappropriate location because of the preschool. Have there been any incidents from the residents in that home?
Yes, there was a murder, which I would say is quite an incident.
In the group home itself?
Ruth Maddox knows more of the details than I do here, but it was apparently one of Joe's house residents that got into a fight or argument and was either kicked out of the house or left the house temporarily, went down to Ann Morrison Park and murdered another guy down there. This was in October of 2019, I believe.
Okay. Thank you.
Okay.
Next up, we'll hear from the applicant.
Madam Mayor, members of City Council, again, Ben Semple with Rodney Evans and Partners, 1450 West Bannock Street. We were notified that an appeal was filed regarding the approval of CUP 22-7 and received by the city on May 3rd, 2022. The project, as you've seen, is located at 1604 South Philippi for a group home, which is considered a single family use within the Boise City Code and is a conditional use within the LOD zone. This project is to allow individuals that have been previously incarcerated to find a living place so that they can secure work and transition back into our community. These people, the residents here, have served their sentences. They are not currently in prison. The alternative to a group home is homelessness or remaining in prison when their sentence is complete. There are very limited options for them in our area. The two grounds that are currently listed were that the property is unsafe for human habitation and that the appellant was denied their deferral request at P&Z. We've determined through a lot of research that the deed has no restrictions on it for use as a residential use. This was confirmed by Idaho Power. They have no vested interest in the property. There is an easement that exists overhead that encompasses the power lines and their facilities. But again, there is no deed restriction. There is a restriction on any expansion, both in footprint and height of the existing home, none of which are proposed with this project. This is an interior remodel to provide 8 rooms for residents. Each room will house 1 resident, which further supports this as a single family use. Yes, it is a group home, but it is a single family use. We've received no confirmation or information from Idaho Power that they have any record of a lawsuit regarding the property. We also have not reviewed or received any documents or information from the appellant or related parties, including the son of the previous mayor, that would indicate that there was a lawsuit or what that contained. We did, however, receive information on the transfer of the easement of the property from Idaho Power to a private owner. This did not restrict his use of that. Yes, he turned it into an office, but he could have just as easily turned it into a single family home if he wanted to. The transfer of the property states that the owner may use the property without limitations as long as the structure and materials on the site remain compliant with the setback from the overhead power lines. A copy of the transfer was included in the appeal, as well as a portion of it was included with our response. The transfer also occurred after the alleged lawsuit that was settled. So to me, that states that there was no restriction on the use if they're willing to sell it back to a private individual for use. Again, Idaho Power provided no comment on any of the CUP or the appeal. And regarding the second appeal grounds, the appellant is not an employee or a legal representative of Idaho Power Company and does not have the right and is not the applicant and does not have the right to request a deferral of a project hearing on the behalf of Idaho Power Company. We look forward to the denial of the appeal so that my client can further develop homes for a very marginalized and underserved segment of our community with really no other options other than this group home. And I would like to cede the rest of my time to the owner, Joe Howell.
Madam Mayor, question before
Sure.
we move there. My understanding is there were some concerns about the proximity of this and the school next door, but then my further understanding was that the school next door wrote a letter of support. Is that correct?
Madam Mayor, Councilmember Halliburton, initially, yes, there was some concern regarding any offenders that would have had sexual oriented offenses. Not only does my client, Joe Howell, not rent to those that have committed a registerable offense, but even those that have pled down to a lesser offense that doesn't require registration as a sexual offender, regardless of that, the proximity to a school would preclude anyone within, with that type of offense from living in this location. And they have indicated their support of the project, specifically because they have another location that is immediately adjacent to a ship house. And they indicated that they're one of the best neighbors they've had.
Great. Thank you for that clarification, Madam Mayor. Another question. I'm not sure what the communication has been with ACHD throughout this process. Council President Clay, serving as Madam Mayor tonight, brought up some questions earlier. My question's actually, I'm really familiar with that area. I used to actually take Spanish lessons from the school. That power pole and the sidewalk that's right there, I'm not 100% sure that it's ADA compliant or that you have the ability to get around the corner from that power pole. And I don't know if there's any conversations with ACHD about crossings or about actually making a right-hand turn onto Overland.
Madam Mayor and Councilmember Halliburton, ACHD did provide a staff report, which basically said they had no conditions on the project.
All right, great, thank you.
Yep.
Since Councilmember Halliburton stopped you and we have you for questions, I'll restate mine. He's absolutely correct. It appears that there is not 4-foot clearance around that corner on the sidewalk. And additionally, if anyone is going to use the bus stop on the other side of the street, there's no crossing between Curtis, no marked signaled crossing between Curtis and Orchard. Do you have any discussions about that?
Madam Mayor, the ACHD did not indicate or provide any feedback on that. We did not have any conversations with ACHD regarding that. It's my understanding that because this was fairly limited in terms of site development, there's really no site development happening at all, and all facilities were in place, that they did not see the need to condition this with any additional improvements. And that's kind of where we stand right now.
However, it's quite probable the users will use the bus line.
There is a bus stop right on the corner there on the side of Overland that can head eastbound. It is true that if they needed to head westbound, they would either walk to a crossing at
Or
Curtis
coming home.
Or coming home, yeah.
Yeah,
True.
thank you. All right.
Thank
You'll
you.
yield your time? Okay.
Hello, my name's Joe Howell, and I
Welcome.
own Joe's House. I'm here to talk to you today about what I do and how I operate my homes. I do single room housing, where traditionally transitional housing, they put 2 or 3 individuals per room. And I find that it's really important when somebody comes out of incarceration into transitional living that they have their own space. I feel like that as a previously incarcerated individual, having to live in a bedroom with another man, it's counterproductive for someone to move on with their life and try to move forward. I do work with local law enforcement. I work with Idaho Department of Corrections. I talk with them regularly. I keep them apprised of who's moving in and out of my homes. I work with United States Probation, and I talk to those officers very regularly. I conduct drug testing that include 12 panels. I test for Suboxone, fentanyl, all the new stuff that's scary out there that's killing people in our community. I run safe, sober homes. My residents, they feel like my houses are home. They can go in, they feel safe, they can keep their belongings there. They don't have to worry about their food being stolen. My residents work full-time jobs. Most of them have vehicles. They go to work just like you or I do every day, and they're just trying to get back into life. I keep my rents at $550 because I feel like that's the most a person can afford while building themselves a life. I know I could charge much more, but I want to really see my residents move on and do good things with their lives. Does anyone have any questions for me?
Are there any questions for the applicant? Thank you.
Thanks.
All right. We do have a neighborhood association. Ashley Malloy is not expected tonight, but she did write a letter. Ashley, are you online?
Madam Mayor, no one is online to testify in this item.
Okay. With that, then we'll go to regular testimony, and Ruth Maddox, you're up.
Hi, my name is Ruth Maddox. I live at 5370 West Bel Air. My property backs up to the new 8-bedroom recent released people to live behind me. Anyway, my neighborhood's concerned for a few reasons. Mr. Howell, first, I commend him for all that he's doing for that demographic of people. But what we're not happy about is that when we did our research, that he has 7 already in our neighborhood within 2 miles. And then he's already got one 200 feet away from this one. And when he was at planning and zoning, he mentioned his first convict down there, but he forgot to mention he also housed another 5. He wasn't clear to to planning and zoning when they didn't know that he had that many houses around us. The other thing is when he first came here last summer and talked to me and told me what he was doing, I said, I know that we're not going to be happy about that. And I don't know anybody that like you, I don't think you would like that in your backyard. And so anyway, he immediately started gutting that house without any kind of permits. I called planning and zoning. I didn't know any better. I just said, can this be possible? They said, well, no, he hasn't filed anything. But he continued to gut it and redo the 8 bedrooms without going to planning and zoning for the rezoning. So he had already decided he was going to do that anyway without the proper permits. So, that was disturbing. And then, so, like I said, again, I get it, but, you don't plant that many on our block, and you don't plant one 200 yards from another one you already owned that had an incident in 2019 that the neighbors said 10 cars surrounded that house. They kicked him out, and then he went down to Ann Morrison Park and killed somebody. It was on the news. So, as safety, we buy our houses to protect our families. We hope that our property values aren't going to plummet with stuff like this. We're just trying to be in a protective neighborhood, and that doesn't make us as a neighborhood feel very protective. I have residents here who've been on this block for 40 years that knew the Amick's family, knew Mrs. Amick, knew all about that lawsuit settled out of court, that, that family moved because of the health issues. And so, when they tell me they think it's a lie, there's people in the audience right here that knew the Amick's family for 40 years. So, it's a true story when we talk about that. The other thing is Mr. Howell, he's in a protected neighborhood in Eagle. He has protected HOAs. He's come into the bench because he's picking on neighbors that don't have HOAs. And so he can run his own
Madam
houses
Mayor,
without
time.
any regulation.
Ruth, you are out of time. If you could wrap it up.
Okay. I just want to thank my neighbors for coming today and supporting this. And one last thing, the school is selling. So they're supporting that, but it's not going to affect them. The owners of Puente School are selling. I learned that 2 days ago. Thank you for your time. Thank you for your time.
Thank you. Any questions? Okay, hearing none. There's not been much testimony. You are offered, I'll give you a minute or two, and then we'll offer the appellant a minute to rebut as well.
Madam Mayor, I don't really have much else to add. 2 of the group homes that were shown on the map are connected to the Joe's House LLC office at Eagleson and Franklin, where Joe works every day. That's approximately a mile from this location. And then the other ones are anywhere from 1.25 miles to 1.5 miles from that same office. I would say that 7 locations in an area that contains thousands of residential homes is not indicative of a high concentration. It just happens to be the homes that Joe has purchased. I've been working with him for the entire time. Yes, he did start a process that if this was not in an LOD zone, if this was a residential zone, he would not be required to do anything other than remodel and obtain the permits necessary to do that remodel, which he does have. There was a stop work order placed on it. During this process, the city has allowed him to get some inspections by the city inspectors so that when the process plays out, he can get it up and running as quickly as possible, because there are approximately 40 to 50 people that are on a waiting list to get into a place to live right now.
Thank you.
That's all. Thanks.
Mr. Schott.
This property has been commercial for 26 years and it should remain that way. It's unsafe property to live in. It's next to a preschool, and who's going to be responsible for issues that might happen? If you do approve this, at least require an updated study of the EMF field that could determine if it's safe or not safe. That would give you hard scientific data to go by. And these sorts of things are relatively simple and could probably be done by an independent third-party contractor, or perhaps even BSU, which I would say was acceptable, to verify, is this unsafe for residential use? And then you've got hard data. That's it.
Thank you. Any further questions for staff?
Madam Mayor, I guess I got some questions for staff.
Okay.
And
Councilmember Halliburton.
I guess these questions aren't they're related to the application. They're not related to the decision that I'm going to make here shortly. But to me, there's some obvious street issues, especially with not being able to go around the corner of that pole. And I don't know what opportunity we have to address that with ACHD at this point or with the rezone.
Madam Mayor, Councilmember Halliburton, I think Ben sort of touched on it. When we're looking at a simple change of use, we're not looking at a full infill development. We're not tearing down buildings. We're keeping everything relatively the same. There's very minimal site improvements required. The parking was there, the structure is there. So looking outside to the pedestrian connectivity was not part of, I think, staff's review and looking at the compatibility, but it's definitely an option for a condition here if you so see fit.
And Madam Mayor, I guess maybe just to kind of make sure that I'm understanding this, because of the nature of the remodel and not a really large redevelopment, it's not really triggering any major changes that we would need to do to the streetscape. It might be a little onerous at that point to make the applicant responsible for paying any sort of street redesign when there isn't any redevelopment. Is that kind of what I'm hearing?
Madam Mayor, Councilmember Halliburton, that is correct. And if ACHD had requested additional improvements, I think staff would have worked with them on that. But after getting their comments, feedback, there was no additional conditions on their behalf.
Great. And I guess, Madam Mayor, so then not being related to the actual application itself, it's probably a conversation that I would be willing to reach out to ACHD and have about that corner, because it's a problem that you wouldn't be able to get around there in a wheelchair. Those are all the questions I got.
Other questions for staff? Okay, hearing none, I will close the public hearing, and matter is before the council. Councilmember Bajent.
Madam Mayor, I would move to deny the appeal in CUP 22-7.
Second.
Madam Mayor.
Moved and seconded. We have some discussion.
There were 3 appeal grounds. The first was that the decision to put this property near a school was racist. We didn't hear any argument about that at all. I don't think that was a serious argument, but to the extent it was, there's no evidence for it in the Planning and Zoning Commission's record, and there's certainly no evidence for it here. The second ground was that the property is unsafe for human habitation. The basis of that was an alleged lawsuit from the 1990s that would be a matter of public record and could be obtained. Nobody's found it, doesn't seem to exist, but at any rate, it's not evidence of anything because there was never a final verdict or a ruling that decided anything. The two parties made an agreement and it went away. So there's no finding of health hazard there. At any rate, even if there were, the planning and zoning's reasoning, it wasn't substantively wrong or in error. And then the third is that this should have been deferred. Any review body or any body has the ability to control this docket and make decisions about when it wants to hear things, including deferment. And even if that were an error, which it was not, there's still an avenue or a remedy for redress by appealing to city council, which is where you are now. So even if it should have been deferred, the failure to do that was harmless because we're here now reviewing it. So I don't see anything that meets our appeal standards, which are pretty rigorous, and that is the basis of my motion.
Thank you. Further discussion?
Madam Mayor.
Councilmember Whittings.
I just want to comment on the shift from commercial to residential. This is actually the second time I've dealt with this week. I was helping a constituent with a similar issue earlier, changing a office condo into a residential condo. And I think that there's potential that we're going to be seeing a lot more of these commercial properties switching into residential properties. And so I would just encourage, I think, staff and planning and zoning and I think that they were clear on this one for sure, but I just think it was so interesting that two of them happened at the same time. So I think it behooves us all to be really clear on what that process looks like. And I think that the denial of the appeal is the right decision here. Thank you.
Madam Mayor.
Halliburton.
Like Councilmember Bajan said, when we look at an appeal, it's a pretty narrow scope of what we're able to do based off of re-looking at the evidence. And so I didn't see anything in there as well that would make me overturn their decision. I would say that we have a very large housing shortage in Boise for everyone. We've got community members who face additional barriers on top of everyone else. And when you are being released from prison and you're trying to get that next start, there's transportation barriers, there's housing barriers, there's job barriers. Luckily, right now is a good time to get a job. And we need places for people to stay. And these are people. And so I do appreciate you putting forward an application. I appreciate the work that you do. That's not why I made the decision tonight to deny the appeal. I made that decision based off of the grounds that we're looking at, but I do appreciate that work and that importance in the community right now.
Further comments? I'm going to make one quick comment. I appreciate the concern of neighborhoods that don't have HOAs and their ability to control things versus neighborhoods that do. And I do hope living in a neighborhood that doesn't have an HOA by choice, because I don't like the restrictions that an HOA gives to those people who live there. At the same time, I do think that our laws and our rules should be such that they can protect people's property. As I look at this particular decision, we are following our laws and our rules. I understand the concern completely. I think all of us would be concerned to have this kind of a new use next to us. However, I also believe that everyone deserves a place to live. I know people who have come out of prison, and being able to have a place to live and have that job has made all of the difference in changing their lives for the better. I am confident that our police department is well aware of where these are and does a good job of doing community policing that is more proactive and not reactive. That's our goal as a community. And I think hearings like this put that on the radar of our police department to make sure that that's a place they can reach out and do that proactive policing. I agree with council members that according to our zoning rules and the appeal procedure, I don't find any reason to uphold the appeal and will be supporting the denial. Would the clerk please call the roll?
Agent,
Yes.
Clegg,
Yes.
Halliburton,
Yes.
Sanchez,
Yes.
Willetts,
Yes.
Woodings.
Yes.
All in favor, motion carries.
Thank you. That is the last order of business today.
Madam Mayor, move to adjourn.
Second.
Moved and seconded. All those in favor?
Hi.
Aye.
We are adjourned. Thank you.